Welcome to Korean History Channel Behind Palace Walls. This video is a non-fiction content reconstructed based on historical facts and events. Some scenes may have been dramatized to aid viewer understanding.
September 1506, Changdeok Palace Main Hall. A man was being dragged out. Though wearing the king's dragon robe, he was no longer king. Yeon-sang-gun, the 10th king of Joseon, had turned Joseon into hell during his 12-year reign. On the day he was expelled from the palace, the people of Hanyang cheered. What had this king done to make people rejoice at his dethronement? Today we delve into the reign of madness of Yeon-sang-gun, the most tragic period in Joseon's history. January 1494, King Sukjong passed away, and a 19-year-old young king ascended the throne, Yeon-sang-gun. Initially, he was not a bad ruler. He enjoyed learning and listened to his ministers, but no one knew. That darkness dwelt deep in his heart. Yeon-sang-gun's mother, Lady Yun, was deposed and executed shortly after his birth. Lady Yun, who received Seongjong's favor, was extremely jealous. One day an incident occurred where she scratched Seongjong's face with her nails, an unacceptable act for a queen. Eventually, Lady Yun was deposed and received poison. Young Yeon-sang-gun was told his mother died of illness. The truth was thoroughly hidden. He was raised by his grandmother, Queen Dowager Insu, and grew up knowing his stepmother, Lady Yun, as his mother. But palace walls could not completely hide secrets. 1504, the 10th year of his reign. Yeon-sang-gun accidentally learned the truth about his mother. In the cruelest way possible, a single word carelessly spoken by a court lady while drunk changed his life. His Majesty doesn't even know who his real mother is. Yeon-sang-gun could not sleep that night. From the next day, he frantically began seeking the truth. He searched through the diary of the royal secretariat and summoned court ladies from that time for interrogation. And he finally learned that his birth mother was deposed and received poison, and that countless ministers were involved in it. "Find everyone who killed my mother. Leave not a single one." This was the beginning of the bloodiest purge in Joseon's history, the Gapsul Literati Purge. Yeon-sang-gun hunted down everyone involved in his birth mother, Lady Yun's dethronement and execution. Those already dead had their graves exhumed and bodies desecrated, while the living and their families were executed or reduced to slavery. Yun Pil-sang, Han Mayong-ho, Jong Yo-chang. These were the greatest meritorious subjects of the era. Their graves were dug up and their corpses dragged out to be beheaded. Even corpses, decades old, were not exempt. Yeon-sang-gun's revenge did not spare even the dead, but this was only the beginning. Though hundreds died in the Gapsul Purge, Yeon-sang-gun's rage did not subside. Rather, having tasted blood, he became even more cruel. After the Gapsul Purge of 1504, Yeon-sang-gun became a completely different person. His mother's tragic death had driven him to madness, and that madness soon began to devour all of Joseon. The first thing Yeon-sang-gun did was revenge against those who humiliated his mother. But the methods transcended imagination. He captured all descendants of ministers who submitted memorials when his birth mother, Lady Yun, was deposed. 3 generations were exterminated and women were made into government slaves. Yeon-sang-gun especially thoroughly destroyed the house of Yun Pil-sang, who led the effort to depose his birth mother. He found even Yun Pil-sang's great-granddaughter and made her a palace slave, dug up his grave, ground his bones to powder, and scattered them in the Han River. "You shall not rest in peace, even in death." But Yeon-sang-gun's madness did not stop there. In 1506, he issued an even more shocking order: the prohibition of Hangul use. The reason was absurd. Hangul wall posters criticizing Yeon-sang-gun had appeared on palace walls and gates. Someone had written insults against the king in Hangul. When Hangul, the script King Sejong created for the people, became a tool to criticize the king, Yeon-sang-gun was enraged. "Anyone who teaches, learns, or uses Hangul shall be severely punished." What was more shocking was the method of punishment. Even neighboring residents who saw Hangul wall posters but did not report them to authorities were punished by association. If one household used Hangul, the entire village was in danger. When a Hangul wall poster was discovered in a Hanyang neighborhood, dozens of nearby residents were interrogated, and more than 10 were beaten to death with cudgels. Knowing Hangul itself became a crime in this bizarre era. Yunsangun ordered all books written in Hangul to be burned. Precious Hangul texts, including the Hunminjeongeum Harya manuscript, were consumed by flames. People had to secretly burn even Hangul letters in their homes. According to one unofficial history, when a Hangul letter sent by a Yangban family wife to her mother was discovered, even her husband was dismissed from office. The script King Sukjong created so devotedly for the people became an object of terror to them. But Yunsangun's tyranny did not end there. Rather, the true madness was just beginning. Having finished avenging his mother, Yunsangun now began destroying the nation for his own pleasure. Yunsangun began turning the palace into a giant pleasure district. He recruited thousands of courtesans and forcibly brought beauties from all over the nation. He gave them the name Hungchong. The expression Hungchong Mangchong, reckless debauchery, still originates from here. From 1505, Yunsangun's madness reached its peak. He decided to make the vast land between Changdeok Palace and Gyeongjong Palace his personal playground. The problem was that people were already living there. Demolish all houses on this land and drive out the people. Following Yunsangun's orders, thousands of homes were forcibly demolished. People lost their homes overnight and were driven out. There was no compensation. Those who protested were beaten with cudgels, and severe cases lost their lives. What was created this way was Yeonbang, a giant pleasure space. According to the diary of the Royal Secretariat, its size reached an astounding 100,000 pyong. Artificial ponds were dug here, pavilions built, and all kinds of exotic flowers planted. What Yunsangun did in Yeonbang truly transcended imagination. Every night he summoned hundreds of courtesans and Hungchong for banquets. Wine and music continued all night, and the king only went to bed at dawn. One unofficial history tells an even more shocking story. Yunsangun created a special courtesan group called Unpyeong, all of whom were women from Yangban families. He forcibly made daughters and wives of ministers who opposed him into courtesans. Indeed, Yunsangun thoroughly destroyed families of ministers implicated in purges. Men were killed or exiled, while women were made into government slaves or palace ladies. Especially young and beautiful women became the king's playthings. A typical case was the granddaughter of Yi Pa, a renowned minister under Sukjong. She was educated as a daughter of a prestigious family, but was dragged to the palace and became Yunsangun's plaything because her grandfather was involved in deposing his birth mother, Lady Yun. Her husband was executed, and her young children were sold as slaves. Yunsangun's debauchery intensified day by day. He completely abandoned state affairs. No matter how many memorials ministers submitted, he did not read them, and had no interest even when people starved to death. He dispatched Chai Hongsa throughout the nation to recruit beauties. Ages between 13 and 20, height and appearance individually measured for selection. Even married women were not exempt. If the king wanted, they forcibly divorced husbands and brought them. In one region, when Chai Hongsa arrived, parents deliberately scarred their daughters' faces or quickly married them to old men. Such was the people's terror. The number of women dragged to the palace varies by record, but exceeded at least 10,000. The cost of feeding and housing them was astronomical. The national treasury was depleted and taxes kept rising. Yunsangun imposed harsh taxes on the people for his pleasure. He even created a special tax called Hungchong tax, literally the people paying for the king's entertainment expenses. Even more outrageous was hunting. Yunsangun, obsessed with hunting, designated Seoul suburbs as gold markers. He turned even land where people farmed into hunting grounds. Entering inside gold markers, let alone catching animals within, was punishable by death. There is a record of a farmer being summarily executed for plowing a field inside gold markers. Another farmer caught a tiger inside gold markers after it killed his ox and was also executed. It became a world where animal lives were more precious than people's lives. Yunsangun's extravagance had no end. He imported tens of thousands of bolts of silk from China and lavishly spent gold and silver treasures. One day he would have new clothes made, and if displeased, tear them up on the spot. At palace banquets, delicacies were served but discarded after 1 or 2 bites. All that food rotted and was thrown away. Meanwhile, people dying of starvation proliferated in Hanyang streets. What happened when ministers remonstrated? Yeonsan-gun mercilessly executed remonstrating ministers. A minister named Kim Gwangpil was beaten to death with cudgels for criticizing the king's debauchery. His corpse was left in the streets for days as an example. The court fell completely silent. Ministers who valued their lives kept their mouths shut, and only sycophants who flattered flourished. Traitors like Im Sehong and Sin Soo-gun wielded power while encouraging the king's pleasure. Spring 1506, Joseon hurtled toward catastrophe. The national treasury was empty, and the people were in misery. But Yeon-sang-gun was still immersed in wine and women day and night in Yeonbang. Finally, ministers moved. On September 2, 1506, rebel forces centered on Park Wonjong, Jang Hui-bin, and Sukjong surrounded the palace. It was the Gyeongjong restoration. Yeon-sang-gun crumbled futilely. The king who killed so many people and ruled through terror had no one to protect him. Even soldiers guarding the palace joined the rebel forces. Dethroned, Yeon-sang-gun was exiled to Gyeongjong on Gangwa Island. There he could not last 2 months and ended his life at age 31. The cause of death is not precisely known, but poisoning is most likely. When Yeon-sang-gun died, Joseon breathed a sigh of relief. Upon ascending, Gyeongjong immediately abolished the evil laws Yeon-sang-gun created. The Hangul prohibition was revoked, and forcibly brought women could return home. Yeonbang was demolished, and expelled people returned to build homes. Gold markers were also lifted, so farming became possible. Joseon slowly returned to normal. But the wounds of Yeon-sang-gun's 12 years were deep. Thousands lost their lives, and tens of thousands had their lives destroyed. Hangul's development regressed decades, and Joseon's national power greatly weakened. Yeon-sang-gun's tyranny is a historical lesson showing how dangerous unlimited power can be. That one person's madness can turn an entire nation into hell, and that the damage becomes entirely the people's burden, we learn through Yeon-sang-gun. While his mother's unjust death deserves sympathy, it could not justify killing tens of thousands and ruining the nation. History remembers what became of the tyrant's end. Thank you for watching. We'll return with more fascinating stories and intriguing topics. Behind Palace Walls, thank you.